So now it's a pleasure to actually introduce my co-worker of today. So it's Emma Rose Metcalfe who will talk. So Emma is not just a Twitter expert, but a designer,
I'm not
a student, and a
definitely.
So she's a designer, a student, and a co-founder of How.Do. She's part of the experience design group at Konstfack, and you're also a so-called white label student at SSES. So you will now share your experience of working as a designer with what you call stubborn dreamers.
I'll try, yeah. All right, hello. Yeah, you can clap. Yeah. Why not? Super. I'm going to try really hard to remember what I was going to say today because I seem to have lots of other things in my head now. Well, let's go. All right. Could we have a quick show of hands of how many designers we actually have in here today? You can put both hands up because there's probably not that many. Yay, yay, lots. Okay, but I've been working within the startup sort of world for a few years since I graduated from my bachelor's as a designer, and I'm going to try and share some of the things or the understandings that I've seen from startup culture that I think would be interesting from a design perspective. So yeah, I'm a designer and I've worked on a lot of different projects. I haven't really set with one path or one type of design. And that means that I have lots of different skills in my back pockets, and I quite like that. And I think it's a valuable thing to keep things secret that people don't know about you. But deep down in one of those pockets, I have a degree in ceramic design. So officially, I guess I'm a ceramic designer. But now everybody knows that, so I have to take it out of my back pocket. And I realized pretty early on studying ceramic design that the learnings that I was going to gain from here would have to not be the obvious ones because I didn't really want to make teacups for the rest of my life. People who make teacups are super people, but that's not what I wanted to be. And I guess this was probably the biggest learning, aside from attention to detail and learning about process and really understanding a craft. The ability to learn how you learn, to know how you learn, was a really strong thing. So in the process of ceramic design, there's something about getting things right at the beginning. Like if you make mistakes at this stage, it's quite easy to fix them. But if you make a mistake a millimeter out or a scratch or something at this really early stage, and then you go and make a plaster model of this, and then you cast that in clay, and then you let it dry, and then you clean it up, and then you fire it, and you take it out and glaze it and put it back in the kiln, and you wait, and you take it out, and you see that there's this glaring big scratch or dip or something in there that you could have fixed at this stage, you really kick yourself because it's impossible to fix it at the end of the process. And I think this was the big learning I had was don't be sloppy in the first stages. You can start again from the beginning a lot of times. Make mistakes at the beginning, but make sure you can fix them at the beginning. Don't wait till it's impossible. So that was the big learning there. And in a sense, while I was at quite a glamorous college in London called St. St. Martin's, I spent most of my time wearing overalls. And I always think of this quote that's from Edison. It says, opportunities are usually missed by most people because they're dressed in overalls and they look like hard work. I think learning is exactly the same. So designers, as you've heard, there's lots of different types of us, doing lots of different things with mindsets and skill sets that are massively varied. But I think one of the most exciting things that's happening at the moment, and technology and the web is really allowing this, is that everybody is becoming a creator. Everybody can design the objects and the environments that are around them. I think this is great, not only because they're the best people to design what they need around them, but also that as designers, we can step back and think about bigger systems and tools and enabling people to create what they need. We don't necessarily have to be on the ground trying to create the small things around people's lives. And in this idea that there's lots of different types of people, I've noticed that designers, when they're stepping back and thinking of big ideas, get to dream a lot. They get really dreamy and make this huge plan, oh, I'm going to change the world. But we don't really have the skill set to carry that out as much as we think we might do. We step out and get lost. And so we go back in and make a new plan. But what I love about entrepreneurs and about startup culture is the energy and the ability to actually have this skill set. Entrepreneurs can make things happen and carry things out. And I think that stubbornness to make things work is a really unique thing that's in this room and in every startup. So the symbiosis between a designer being quite dreamy and making huge plans, and a startup or an entrepreneur being quite stubborn, I think is a really interesting symbiosis. And I think there's more and more of that happening at the moment, and that's great. So a designer, I'm an experienced designer, or I will be if I graduate in a month's time and don't get distracted before then. And that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but in essence, I guess this is about looking at what design really is and what the value of design is. And I think design in itself is an emotive and a visual language. And that means it's a human language. Everybody can have emotions, everybody feels things, and most people understand things better with visuals. And so by using an emotive and visual language, we can converse and try and communicate things much more easily. And I think in essence, that's a really interesting thing about design. And personally, I love user research, and I've been really lucky to have jobs or to taken jobs where I can do a lot of user research, whether that's hanging out with long-term mental health patients or playing basketball with kids or shopping in supermarket. I don't love that bit so much. Or I remembered I had a slide. Or looking for authentic experiences as a tourist. The thing about doing user research is you realize it doesn't actually matter what people are doing. What they're doing is irrelevant. It's why they're doing it and how they're doing it that's really important. And although that sounds obvious and you read it everywhere, it's about taking the time to have empathy and really connect with what you're feeling and what you're seeing around you. Because if you can't connect with what you're feeling and seeing, then you're going to have a really hard time understanding your customer, understanding your user. And this made me think about Architecture for Humanity. And they have this book they brought out a while ago called Design Like You Give a Damn. And this made me think, yeah, actually you need to give a damn, and this is something startups should be really aware of. So when you're out there with your clients and with your users or your customers, and you're trying to feel and kind of take in everything, from what I see from experienced design and doing user research is that if you don't give a damn, your customer or your user won't give a damn either. And if they don't give a damn about what you're doing, it's going to be really hard to do what you do and make it work. And for that reason, it's a case of making it easy on yourself. Care about what you're doing and make something that people can love or people can really value, and you'll have a much easier job in doing it. And that sounds hard, because it is kind of hard, but I think it's back to I can't go back, but it's back to the last slide about minimal viable experience, which I didn't explain, sorry, MVE. Which comes from the idea of minimal viable product, something that startups are very familiar with, getting your product at its minimum so that you can go and streamline and work fast and iterate. But I think by moving the minimal viable experience to the top at the same time as we talk about product, that becomes a lot easier to have these things fall off and you're more aware of these things. Same thing with experience channels. What are the channels of experience that people are going to take through your service or your product? They should be at the same time as your business model. If you're designing a business, who you're designing it for and who's experiencing it. So this slide is about design and make a startup like you give a damn, because it'll make it a lot easier for you. So for the last few years, I've been trying to figure out how these things come together, and it feels very exciting or incredibly exciting to be working on something called How.Do. Now, How.Do is an app for knowledge exchange in the real world, in the physical world. And it allows people to discover what they know and what the people around them know how to do. And for me, this really celebrates a shift in culture between being able to find now all of the information that we need on the internet in seconds. And then how people do things becomes really interesting, because information isn't knowledge. It's a very different thing. So whether that's peeling a banana or how your grandfather stacks his log pile and capturing that knowledge, or whether that's how your best friend is really great at explaining the Hadron Collider at CERN in 2 seconds or 2 minutes. That knowledge should be shared in a way that feels really great. And I think from what we've studied, video is way too slow and it's frustrating, and the idea of text and photographs is also really fiddly and stuck on desktops. So we're taking this mobile into the real world and into very, very condensed, focused chapters of audio and photographs, which capture the imagination and let you really get into the process of exchanging knowledge with somebody else. So when I figured that I was going to talk about stubborn dreamers, I thought, I wonder how this actually applies to How.Do, because if it doesn't really apply and we're not doing it, I probably shouldn't talk about it. And that took me back to this moment when I was in India with SSCS on a boot camp in the winter with Nils, who's my co-founder, and sitting on the stage. And I didn't realize this at the time, but Nils is a massive stubborn dreamer. So this was a day when I was ready to go home. We were 5 or 6 kilometers from home, and it was getting dark, and we had these bikes that we'd hired that we really had to get back to the hire store, and Nils could not leave this place without asking these guys, but exactly how do you make the best ice blocks in Cochin in this giant ice machine factory? And I was like, oh man, Nils, come on. But that idea of being stubborn enough to make people around you adapt to you and to give the focus to what you're doing, but also that tenacity to explore, to continually question, I think is really interesting and incredibly lucky to find in a team. And that comes throughout our whole team. So we have a UX designer in London and 2 iOS developers here and a back-end developer, and they all work during their night times, and I think that's amazing. But I really believe it's because they give a damn about what they're doing, and they're starting up with something they really feel is valuable to the world. So that's great, and it feels incredibly special, whatever falls off, that this is something really, really intense, and we're doing it for the right reasons. So I watched some other talks, and I figured you have to have a takeaway slide, otherwise everyone switches off and nobody tweets. So some takeaways for you. Design a startup like you give a damn. Really care about what you're doing, and other people will care about it too. Make value for the world. Dream more. If you're a startup sitting there and you've got a really, really nice plan, but it doesn't change the world in any way, have a dream. Or just find a designer who's got an amazing dream and help them out. If you're a designer with an amazing dream, go and find a startup co-founder who's more stubborn than you are and can actually make these things happen. Or maybe luckily you're both of them, and then work on all of them and go change the world. But most importantly, and underlying what I really believe in is never ever stop learning. Never stop learning in what you're doing. And this is about looking past what's happening and really asking why it's happening and figuring out how it's happening and how you can be involved in it. And to borrow on the words of my old boss, and I apply this to learning, when you're in a startup, you might not always be having fun. This doesn't always feel like fun when you're still up at 3 a.m. trying to fix the UX problems. But it'll never ever feel like work, because you'll always be learning. And I think that's the most important thing. So, tack, that's me done. I don't even know what time it is.
Perfect. Thank you.
I wasn't done. I wasn't done. Feel free to shout us or grab us. We're here.
Excellent.
If any of that's interesting.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, pleasure.
So basic question. So I mean, I've met you as a very curious person. I met you in very different contexts. Neuroscience pubs at KI in some weird basement to places like this. So is this kind of part of your design process to kind of sample around from lots of different contexts and people and experiences kind of?
Yeah, to lean a little bit on what Hoa said, is actually part of my life process. It just is the way that I work, and I realized that that's actually really important and useful for design. So now I've been building that into how I work and how important that is for us as a young company to build into our process.
Yeah.
And I guess if this room was filled with designers, I wouldn't be standing here. So if you go outside of your fields, I think it's really important to move around. You learn so much more than staying in your own kind of front room, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's super important.
So can you say something about like how you and Nils actually work together and how you actually complement each other?
Yeah, maybe Nils is better
and maybe
to
Nils
answer.
can comment on this as well.
No, but I think we complement each other in a way that we're both quite calm in our approach to many things.
Yeah.
So I was sat in a lecture at Handels the other night trying to learn business, and the lecturer is talking about how most startups spend 50% of the time arguing between the co-founders. I was like, no, we don't argue. No, not yet. But I think Nils is the best hustler that I've ever met. And he's quite unique about this because he doesn't come across that way. And he really has a grasp on everything that I don't have a grasp on. And as vague as that sounds, I think that's probably the best collaboration, when you just understand that everything you're not doing, your partner is picking up.
Yeah.
And that symbiosis feels very good.
Do you have any comments to this, Nils?
No, I haven't.
No. Very good.
Yeah, so one question from the crowd is, so you said you're at the Experience Design Group at Konstfack. What do you guys do?
Yeah, what do? We play a lot. So the Experience Design Group is a mixture of artists, designers, and some wild cards that come from other disciplines and try and hack it with a bunch of artists and designers who are lost and looking for a new direction. And they do a very good job of hacking it. And for the first year we play, we experiment, we really test what is somebody's experience in many different senses, and sometimes that leans very heavily into an artistic sense, and sometimes that's in a business sense, and sometimes it's in something that I haven't figured out. It's very open in the first year, and we collaborate with a lot of different partners. So one of them was Karolinska, and I spent almost 6 months working with the Center for Molecular Medicine, and working on a grant for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation of how we can innovate by using design and thinking and experience design with the research process. So taking it right to the beginning and saying what happens when we mix these things up at the very base. And I think the opportunity to do that comes through Experience Design Group. We have our Professor Ronald Jones going out and connecting up lots of different interesting specialisms, very different from ourselves. Aside from that, we help out with the after party for the Nobel Nightcap, looking at how the red thread goes. So, in some sense, very much experience design, just experiences, some of it systems design.
So can you also comment on how was it to actually work with researchers and maybe doctors as well?
Yeah.
Because I guess they have a completely different way of doing things. And
they do, but what really grounded us, so at the very beginning of this collaboration between the Experience Design Group and Center for Molecular Medicine, we had already understood that we've got to hang out and be friends before we can figure out how each other works. And we also need to get our differences aside. So we had a huge table, sit-around discussion, and each brought up the prejudice that we had about the other. So I think what came out was designers are egotistical, and scientists are nerds. And kind of these really...
That's not true, of course.
No, this is what I found out, yeah. But bringing that to the beginning, and then we realized that both of us work in very similar goals or aims. We both believe in something that we don't actually know what the end result is. Mm-hmm. So scientists continually trying to explore, designers really trying to explore and solve problems, but the process delivers the real problem partway through. And we both had an incredible amount of passion for what we did, and that in itself brought us together. What else was in that question?
No, I think that's
Are you sure?
pretty... So one last question. So you're a white label student. What is that?
Wow. Yeah, good question. I don't know how I managed to end up in all these approximate places. White Label was a program that was started running last September with Stockholm School of Entrepreneurship. And there's 6 of us students there that come from different universities in Stockholm. We all have very different backgrounds. But again, there's a uniting factor. We're all super geeks in our own field. We love what we do, and we love working, but we also love partying and hanging out and socializing. So we have an excellent mix of drinking beer, creating ideas, and working. And I had to describe this program for an application the other week, and figured out the best way to describe it was a rough diamond kind of project or program, because it brings together some people that might have some potential. Tumbles them around a lot, gives them a lot of friction, throws some things at them that aren't so pleasant, kicks them in the ass every now and again, but supports them at the same time to create ventures and to work together and to work with other people. So we do a combination of everything that SSES offers, and then we have this kind of nice smattering of mentors and speakers that come and hang out with us and trips.
Nice.
Yeah, it's an amazing program. You should all apply. I believe they're running it again.
That's good. Very good commercial. So thanks a lot, Emma.
No, thank you.
And please don't forget the book.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.